Really quickly, this is for those, I know a lot of you guys do this for estimating the soil water content by look and feel, but here's kind of a beginning of a way to do the look and feel method. Depending on what your soil texture is, different soils behave differently, but it gives a process to that method. So a lot of growers get good at this over time. If it was me, I would kind of calibrate myself to the soil. So in other words, go out there sometime when you definitely see water stress, and then go dig then and do the look and feel method then, and then go right after you've irrigated, like the day after, and then do look and feel method then. So you have those 2 points, when it's full and when it's really water stress, and then you can use that as a kind of a way to estimate how much water your soil or how close you are to needing additional water. And this will kind of help you quantify that in terms of inches of water per foot. And actually the number in here that it gives that I think is the most interesting is in here. It says the inches per foot depleted. So that's how far down you are from full. So inches of water per foot depleted, so like let's say if you're 0.5 inches per foot depleted, you're growing corn, you have a 3-foot root zone, and you looked at all the different levels, 1 foot, 2 foot, and 3 foot, and it's then 0.5 times 3, that means you're 1.5 inches total depleted in your whole root zone. So that means you can apply 1.5 inches of water without losing any to deep percolation. So that's this pamphlet. It's been around for ever. It's published by the NRCS. It's great, and so we continue to hand them out. This is a book that's published by the National Center for Appropriate Technology. My favorite word is appropriate because it's kind of hands-on. It's not pie-in-the-sky stuff that you won't use. On one side talks about water management until after a while you're going to start reading upside down, and that's because you're into the irrigation equipment maintenance portion of it. Talks about how to set up a pump. A lot of good information in this that I think is
Try that one brochure we have in Spanish as well.
Okay, great.
The hand feel method.
Yep, great. We have them in Spanish. So really quick demonstration. So I have my soil here, and let's say that, so right now it's full of water, right? And so if, let's say that this represents my whole root zone of my crop, and so I'll simulate water being used by the crop a little bit. So crops use water, some evaporates from the soil surface, and the crops suck it up through the roots and out, transpires out of the leaves. And so when we irrigate, what our goal is to replace that water that was lost. So we replace that water that was lost, and it goes in and it's held in the soil profile. But if we over-irrigate, the soil can't hold that water. There's a limit to how much water it can hold, and it's going to go out the bottom. And that will take nutrients and other stuff that your plants need with it. So the goal is to replace that water that's used, keep track of how much water is lost, and then how much water you put into it so that you have a budget. And this is what this is about. So basically, irrigation scheduling is knowing when to turn the water on, how long to leave it on, how much to apply, how fast to run your pivots, etc. When we do this, we get better yields, we get better quality, we lower our pumping bills, we lower our irrigation labor costs, we lower our fertilizer costs, and then we stay out of trouble. Obviously, as we increase the amount of water applied, we get better and better yields, but there's definitely a peak there where we stop getting more yields, better yields, and actually the quality and your yields are going to start to decrease. So over-irrigating increases incidence of plant diseases, blights, molds, rots, and wilts. You have less oxygen in the root zone, which leads to denitrification. Also, you have reduced storability if you're growing vegetables. And you're spending money for labor, pumping, and fertilizer costs that are unnecessary. And then it's just muddy and it's hard to get in there and work in it. So, after a while, people just need to turn the water off for crying out loud. So basically, we think of our soil as a bucket, right? So the bucket has a limited size and a limited amount of water that can be held in there. If when the bucket is full, we call that field capacity. If we apply more water than field capacity, it goes out the bottom of the root zone. So we can kind of simulate that as overflowing the bucket. And when the bucket's empty, it's so dry, it's rock hard, the crop's dead. And it can't be recovered. We call that wilting point. So the difference, we have a limited size. The size of this bucket depends on two things. The water holding capacity of your soil. Every soils can hold different amounts of water. And the rooting depth of your crops. So deeper crops have access to more soil and therefore greater quantity of water that can be held. So in order to do irrigation scheduling, we need to know how big the bucket is, and then where our soil water content is, so that when we apply irrigation to precipitation, we fill it up and we keep the crop happy, but we don't lose water to deep percolation. So we can Vapid Transpiration, ET. If we keep track of this, we can also help do a soil water balance. If we have different types of soil in our field, let's say we have silt and sand, we're always going to see water stress in the sand first. So ET is going to be the same. Crops need the same amount of water regardless of what kind of soil they're grown in. They want to use the same amount of water, but the sand can't hold very much water, so you're always going to see water stress in the sand first. But it doesn't mean that you should irrigate sand more. So I hear a lot of people say, well, I've got to slow the pivot down when I go over that sandy areas to apply more water to that area because I always see water stress. Well, you're just overflowing the bucket more than it was before and causing more problems than you had before. Sandy soils can't hold water, so they need to be watered more frequently with less amount of water each time. Okay. And so if we have a deep silt soil, a deep sand, it's going to look like this. A shallow silt soil, like a rock layer or something, or a restrictive layer that doesn't allow the water or roots to go down into there, or a shallow sand. So you're always going to see water stress in these areas where you've got a small bucket first. This is one of the benefits of pivots, is that pivots can apply water fairly frequently. You can get around every couple days or so, depending on your pivot and a whole bunch of other things. And allows, and drip irrigation actually allows you to irrigate twice a day if you want to. And so if you're irrigating alfalfa, a deep-rooted crop, and you're in a silt-loam soil, you have a lot of screw-up capacity, right? Because you've got a big bucket. I can use water, and then I can run wheel lines or whatever, and I can apply a lot of water each time, and then go a long time between irrigation events without having any problems. But if I've got shallow sandy soils and I've got a wheel line out there, then most of that water that I apply is going to run off out of the bottom of that soil, and I'm not going to get the benefit of that, and that crop's going to show up as water stressed just a couple days after you're irrigating anyway. So if I have several of these soil types in the same field, how do I manage it? If I've got a pivot, do I apply more water in some areas because it can hold more water? Actually, remember that the ET is the same. So our applied water we want to apply the water at the same rate that the water is being used. So if you manage your water to your sandy areas of your field, all these other areas are going to be fine. So pick your lowest water holding capacity area of your field, manage to that so that you're not leaching and also that you are not causing water stress in that area, and then the rest of your field is going to be happy still. Okay? You have less buffer for doing things wrong in shallow sands. But doesn't mean you can't grow great crops in sandy, actually poor soils, as long as you manage things right. So here's a full bucket. This is 100% field capacity. There's the empty bucket, permanent wilting point. As as the crops dry the soil down, we get maximum production from the crop for a while, but after a while it has to fight, and it's harder for the plant to get the water away from the soil, and so we start to see the crop production go down. Corn will roll its leaves, so it'll get pointy. This is a self-protection mechanism that the corn is going into. The stomates close in the corn, so it's not losing water, but it's also not exchanging CO2. It's not getting the maximum yield. So the water use and the yield is going to drop after that point. So what we want to do is choose a point. We call this the MAD, or the management allowable deficit, or as a percent of this available water. We say, well, we're not going to let the soil water content go below 50% of a full bucket. So for corn and alfalfa and most hay crops that dairymen grow, this is true. It's not necessarily true for vegetables, etc., which are more water sensitive, and then you have to keep more towards the top end of this of a full bucket in order for it to be happy. Okay, so we can chart the soil water content, this blue line, over time. Remember, here's full bucket, here's the MAD point. Below this line, we're going to start to see water stress. Here's a wilting point, so this is dead. So we can plot irrigation events here, where we push the soil water content up, and then every day it uses a little bit of water, we push it back up, push it back up. So the goal is to keep it between this field capacity and this MAD line, so we have maximum production, so that we're in this top portion of our bucket. So if we apply more water than the soil can hold, then it goes out the bottom of the profile as deep percolation. Okay. So what we did, and I'm just going to switch over, is basically we created a tool because there's a network of weather stations throughout this area. AgWeatherNet, there's also weather stations in Oregon, Idaho, California, Washington, Montana, that we can use. We can pull data from these weather stations, and we can use that data to estimate how much water a particular crop is using on a given day. This is called Vapid Transpiration. So, and what we do is we estimate what a reference crop is. We say full-grown alfalfa, and alfalfa is our reference crop. Say full-grown alfalfa on a particular day under these weather conditions is going to use about this much water. And the amount of water that a crop uses changes very drastically with the weather, and it also changes drastically over the season. The most notable thing, I think it was mentioned before, is that in the spring, crop water use needs are much lower than they are in July and August, June, July, and August. So April and May, everybody's feeling their Wheaties. You're seeing things starting to grow like crazy. We think, well, we need to apply water. But what happens is we just spent a buttload of money to put a bunch of water out on the field, and then we're feeling our Wheaties, so we apply a bunch of water, but our crop water use needs are lower in the spring, so that's when we tend to leach more water in the spring than we do otherwise. So what this does is it pulls that data from the weather networks, calculates evapotranspiration, it's a long, complicated equation, multiplies it by crop coefficient. And a crop coefficient is specific to the crop and that crop's growth stage. So like corn that's this tall obviously uses a lot less water than corn that's tasseled out and it's filling out the ear. So those crop coefficients change over the season, as well as what that reference ET changes over the season. So it does kind of all this stuff behind the scenes for you to estimate what the daily ET is, and then it does a soil water balance for you. So if we put in there, okay, this is the type of soil I'm growing, this is my crop, these are my dates that I planted, etc., then we can do use this irrigation scheduler mobile, which does that soil water balance for you, and it tells you on a daily basis, this is a full, here's dead, where you're at and how far down you are from full. So if I was going to irrigate today, this says, well, if I wanted to refill my soil profile, I would apply 0.9 inches, and then I would be fairly confident that I wouldn't be leaching water to deep percolation. Also, you could use this actually to provide records if you wanted to, all this data is private, we will never share it with anybody, but you can use it to provide records to show that if you needed to prove that, hey, I have been trying hard to keep water out of the ground, prevent leaching. Okay. So we tried to make it really usable. So what I'm going to do is just do a quick demonstration.
It's already pulled up if you click on
it is?
Mozilla.
Oh, under.
It's on the other side. So it's like the first two tabs, or second tab there.
All right. Okay, so what this is Ag WeatherNet. So this is the website for Ag WeatherNet. This is a network of weather stations throughout the state of Washington. You can see where they're all located. If you don't live in the state of Washington, there's another weather network in Oregon and Idaho called AgriMet, and that you can use that weather stations that are closest to you. So basically what you would do is you would choose the weather station that is closest to you and represents your field's growing conditions the closest. Then you would need to, and this is a great tool for a lot of different reasons. It gives you, how many have signed up on Ag WeatherNet or getting kind of daily input? Okay, so it's a fairly well used book. It gives you, it'll tell you what the wind speed is, so you can know, okay, yeah, it's okay to spray, etc. It has a lot of different tools. It'll give you alerts. Let's say if the temperature goes below a certain point, and you need to get out there. And what? That's not working good. Yeah. So it's modeled, and they're working on that. But anyway, it's better than poking behind the shark.
Click on the 34 there. Down.
Okay, 34 is actually the temperature.
Go over.
This measure, this one?
No, the other way
That's
out.
in this
Right
one?
there. Yeah. 60 degrees ground. No, 42 today. That's pretty
So
good.
this shows a picture of that weather station. Shows some things. Does estimate of the soil temperature, a bunch of others.
Rocks are hot.
Yeah. Okay, so in order to use this tool, you would need to log in with your username and password and set up username and password. And so let me actually log in. Okay, so it opens up a lot of different tools. So in here, let's go to, this is something you might need to write down, weather.wcu.edu/ISN. So ISN stands for Irrigation Scheduler Mobile. And what this is you can see it's got a narrow screen. It's designed for use on your phone, right? And so if you do have an Android, who all has smartphones? Almost everybody. Okay, if you don't, then this is your perfect excuse to write it off as a business expense, okay?
There's manure application apps too, so it'd be
okay. So and so if you have an iPhone, then what you would do is you navigate to this URL, and then at the bottom it has a little box with an arrow coming out of it, and you click on that box, and then say add to my home screen. And then it'll put a little icon on your home screen. And what it'll do is you click on that icon with your finger, it'll open it up, this URL in a web browser, and it actually looks like you will be in the Safari web browser, but it'll look like you're using an actual app.
What's the URL?
Weather.wsu.edu/ISN. So let me log in, and I'll show you. So there's some fields. So I manage a few pivots close to my house, and I also have been doing some irrigation scheduling on some pasture, and I've been playing with this as well. Okay, so here it is. This is grass turf. I just set up this for this year. Okay, so a couple things in here. So the dashboard, this is what you're looking at here. This gives you an update of what's going on. Then the other two things, this is the soil water chart. So this is just the beginning of the season. Actually, nothing's growing, but I just forced it to start. So ET rates are very low, and so it says it's full, and the soil water content just isn't moving much past full because ET rates are so low. The other thing, this is today, this white line, this line right here, and then it does a 1-week forecast using National Weather Service predicted maximum and minimum temperatures, so you can do a little bit of planning out into the future, at least 1 week ahead, as to what the weather's going to be like, and so you can irrigate to that out in the future. So that's the daily budget. Then the other thing is the daily budget table, which shows, let's go back. So again, green line is full, red line, if you go below the red line, you're going to start to see water stress. You go all the way down in increasing amounts of water stress all the way down to the black line, at which point it's dead and it stops using water. So here's rainfall events that were measured at that station that this was set up on. This I set up for grass turf, like I was doing my lawn. Then the daily budget table, it shows the date, estimated crop water use, teeny tiny, right? 1/100th of an inch. Rainfall, if it was measured. And then your percent of your available water. So 100% is a 100% full bucket. 0% is empty bucket, the wilting point. And so if I get close to 50%, in this case, I'm going to start to see water stress. Here's my soil water deficit, how far down I am from full. So this tells me how much I might want to irrigate on a particular day. So here's a lot of different fields I've got set up in here. Let me go into okay, so this, and then I can navigate back and forward in time. Let's go to, well, this is the one that I kept up. And well, I didn't do any of these. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong account. Anyway, let's just pretend that this is today. This increases up. You have all the lines move up in the first part of the season. Why? Growing root zone, right? Because as that root pushes down, I get a bigger and bigger bucket. So in the early part of the season, I have a smaller window for error than I do later in the season. So here we see the soil water content, comes down. Here, rainfall events. Here's irrigation events. I'm pushing it up, etc.
Does it have inputs for harvest intervals like in alfalfa?
Yep, it does. So in fact, let's go to. Here's testing. A lot of these are just kind of for instances where I was playing with it. So I'll show you. On alfalfa, it knows which ones are forage crops. So this one I didn't put any irrigation in at all, and you can see alfalfa would not have done well without irrigation, as we are all aware. So let's say we can go to the beginning of the season in here. And then go, I'm advancing 1 week at a time. So it's starting to get water stress. Let's say I irrigate first, and then one thing I can do here, I can say, well, I irrigated. My soil water deficit is 5.7 inches. Let's say I'm running a wheel line and I can apply 3.5 inches at a time. And then I say save. And what it's going to do is, it says wait. And it changes that, and it just lets me know where I'm at a particular time. The other thing you can do in here, let's say I cut my forage on a particular date, and what that does is it adjusts the crop coefficients back down, and then it allows them to regrow. One other thing that you can do by clicking edit for any one of these days is, as soon as this catches up, is we can, let's say I go out there, and this is a model, right? All models are just, they're garbage in, garbage out, and sometimes maybe some of your parameters are off, or the model gets off over time. And I go out there and I do the look and feel method, and it says, well, it says I should be water stressed, but I know I'm not. And so you can go in here and you can say, let's correct. It says I should have 75% of the available, and I know let's say it's 50%. And save. And so you can kind of fix it and adjust it over time. Where that is really useful is at the beginning of the season, or let's say you start using this, like in the middle of the season, then you can do it that way. The little dotted lines around here shows that it was harvested on those dates. So more charts, and also you can do the daily water use. You can see how that changes over time. The cumulative water shows the total water crop, and usually this curve is going to look like this because the crop water use accelerates quite a bit during the middle of the season. The reason why it's coming down is because this crop is water stressed. Here's the total rainfall, here's the total irrigation. Crop coefficients, the total water loss to deep percolation, the total water stress. So water stress, you know, we're seeing a lot of water stress later in the season, etc. So, and then you go in here and field settings, and you can have it show you the forecast values or not. You can have it send you notifications by email or by a text. You can, if you're trying to compare with an existing volumetric water content sensor that you have out in the field, those numbers come out in the percent of the total volume. And so a full bucket is going to be like 35%, not 100%. So it's a different way of looking at the same numbers. But if you're trying to compare, then you can click this and it will use volume. It will show volumetric water content in there instead of the percent of the available water. And also, if you have solid set irrigation, like if you have a wheel line, or if you have something where everything is kind of set up in terms of hours of runtime instead of inches of water applied, you can say, I want to use hours instead of inches, but in order to make this work, you need an application rate. Talked about using the straight-sided cans for sprinkler irrigation. You need to figure out what your inches per hour is, or there's calculators in here to help you calculate what those are. So, you know, if you have a sprinkler or drip, or in general, let's say I have a pivot, it's 120 acres, flow rate of 900 gallons a minute, application efficiency. So here's my, so anyway, there's some tools in there to help with that as well. Use hours. And then you can change all of those inputs to the field in terms of what your water holding capacity is of your soil, what the dates are. These are probably going to be important to you. When the crop emerged, when it really started to grow, when it's about got full cover, when it's mature like corn, it'll start to shut down and it'll start using less water as it hardens off, and then when you harvest or the end of the season. Root zone depths and those crop coefficients. So in other words, you can play with it and set it up. We tried to make it very easy. Let me go through really quickly. We'll add a new field. So let's say add a new field. Basically you would say, okay, the back 40 or whatever. Then the year, you want to select your network. It works in other states, so depending on where you are. In Washington, you probably use AgWeatherNet. Choose your weather station that's nearest you. I don't know that much about these. So let's go weather. We'll say we're close to Prosser. I know where that one is. WC headquarters. And then choose my crop. Let's say corn, grain corn, and then soil. You choose your soil texture. What this is going to do is based on your soil texture and based on your crop, it's going to bring on a bunch of defaults to kind of get you started as to what your growing season dates are, what the MAD number might, a good guess for what MAD ought to be, what the rooting depth is, and crop coefficients, etc. So it's been added, so you can go to the soil water chart. It's not going to show anything because we're outside of the growing season right now. But we can change the growing season and force it to show up by saying, well, the growing season started January 2nd or something. So, any questions about this? Irrigation scheduler mobile. So basically, what it does is allows you. It's a tool. One other tool. There's Other tools that you might be able to use are get a service from these guys, the consultants that come out and help you do irrigation scheduling, where they take soil moisture measurements and they provide these kinds of a weekly report to you, say here's where you're at with your soil moisture, and we recommend this much water, etc. But this is kind of a cheap, inexpensive way to kind of get at the same type of information. So we do have a privacy policy on this, which is essentially that we're not going to share this with anybody. We collect general kind of usage statistics like, well, we had 300 users this year, but that's all, in order to kind of justify the continued investment and development of this kind of things. But other than that, we don't say this person leached water.
Is there a fee?
Nope, it's free. Yep.
If to go to it, is it on the Ag WeatherNet site? Can you get to it by going to the
Yes, good question. So if you do go to the main Ag WeatherNet site, you can get to it there. There's also, you go down here into irrigation. And so here's the mobile version that I was just at. But also it has a full page version if you're more inclined to use it on your web browser at home and you don't want a team screen. But the mobile version is designed for small screens and fat fingers. Okay, that's basically it. Anyway, we wanted to make it useful. Let me make sure that I covered what I was going to cover. Really quickly, this is the assumptions, the crop coefficient. So there's 3 numbers for crop coefficient. We assume that the crop water use, this is a number that's multiplied by the reference for alfalfa, full-grown alfalfa, right? So 0.4 means it uses 40% of what full-grown alfalfa is. 1 means it uses 100% of what full-grown alfalfa. So we assume that it behaves like this, it goes like this. And so we have 5 different dates. The emergence date, the canopy exceeds 10% of the field, full cover right here, and then this initial maturation. A lot of crops, like if you're green chopping corn, it never drops down, so this would go straight across at the end of the growing season. So, and then we have 3 numbers: initial, full cover, and then we have this final crop coefficient that you can adjust. So let's say you're using it and you see that it kind of consistently underestimates crop water use. Well, you can adjust this full cover crop coefficient down or up, and then that will adjust that for you. Also assumes that the root zone grows like this, very linearly from the root zone depth that you planted at, grows linearly, and then it assumes that we reach full root zone depth at the same date we get full cover on the crop, and then it goes flat. So kind of some very simplifying assumptions. Is not perfect, but it gives, we tried to make it so that it's simple enough so that you guys can mess with it without having to have a PhD. So. And know like coefficients of polynomials and stuff like that. There's help links on every page that kind of shows if you get stuck with it. Full page version. I think we talked about all this. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Troy about anything agriculture, ag, or irrigation related?
Another thing that we are doing is we've done some trials with what's called Lisa on pivots, where we can, you know, most drops are placed about this high, and then they're about 10 feet apart. Well, we're putting the drops down here, kind of below your knees, and we're putting them at about 5 feet apart. Irrigation efficiency goes way up, wind drift goes way down, volatilization, if you have neighbors that complain about bad smells or everything when you're irrigating with effluent, that would help with that. What else? Anyway, it works. One of the problems is you're applying the same amount of water in less time. So if you've got fields that have tight soils and you are already having problems with runoff, it's going to make it worse. So if you have tight soils, steep slopes, it's probably not for you. But if you have fairly open soils that'll take water quickly, it might be a great option.
Dam or diker.
Dam or diker definitely helps with that. Okay.
Is there moisture meters that you recommend as far as in the field?
Not really. I wouldn't say one is. I mean, if you talked to the different consultants, they all work with a different particular probe, but they're all kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, in my opinion. All capacitance-based probes, which are anything that's kind of electronic and kind of has to be in contact with the soil, those kind of sample a very small area right around where that probe, where it's in contact with the soil. And so in those cases, the installation is very key and important. And you're going to see some variability because there is lots of variability in soils. Like watermark sensors, you've all heard of these, or tensiometers. It measures a different parameter, which is soil water tension or suction, than these soil water content sensors do. And so basically what I suggest everybody to do is to put them in and then calibrate your experience to the number that it gives you instead of kind of depending on the absolute value of that number being right. So just you'd go out there and you'd see, well, look and feel, or I see water stress, make a line, say I don't want to be here again, the same way that I said with the look and feel. And then the others draw a line where, like a day after you irrigated and the soil's full, and so you can kind of see where you're at that way. So kind of, and then consultants that have been using them for a long time have more experience with those than I do. I don't have hands-on experience with those, so I trust in their experience.